My guests today are Cathleen Lewis. I never met her till a few minutes ago, but was a part of inviting her because she has a great story to tell. You may or may not have noticed this church is different than many churches in that we focus on witnessing, where some churches focus on preaching. We don't try to preach sermons from up here to down there. We do try to bring people who can come here and tell us what God has done in their life. And we tell them, don't preach us a sermon. Just tell us the true story of how you have been blessed and saved. And that's the great story about Cathleen Lewis and her beautiful son, Rex. Their story has been featured on the CBS famous program 60 Minutes. Rex was born with a large cyst on his brain which led to blindness and crippling autism. Despite being born with these great challenges, Rex is a musical savant. He has perfect pitch. He is capable of hearing any song and playing it back immediately by ear. Cathleen is here to share her story of entrusting Rex to God and finding her faith in the process. Welcome with me that great, great mother, Cathleen Lewis.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Schuler.
You radiate. I have a gift for sensing it. Some people have a gift of singing, talking, hearing. I have a gift of discerning.
It's an important gift.
It sure is. And I see the fruits of Christ in your life. But start at the beginning, about Rex. That's where we're going to talk mostly about.
And that is the beginning of my life, in a way.
Tell us a story.
When Rex was born, well, I was expecting a child, and I had a lot of dreams for him, like we all do when we give birth. But when Rex was born, it was more like a death to me.
At the birthday?
Not right at the birthday, when I began learning what was going on with him more and more. On the birthday, I fell in love with my child, absolutely forever in love with this little baby. It was a feeling stronger than any I'd ever felt before. But I did know that he had a cyst in his brain that had to be operated on. And after it was operated on, we thought that that was it, that we'd go on with our lives and our dreams for this beautiful child. But there were complications. We then learned that he was blind, and that was shattering. That felt like death, and I was heartbroken for my baby, and I was full.
How old was he when you discovered he was blind?
He was 4.5 months.
You didn't know it until then?
No, because of his brain operation, and it looked like he was focusing on me, but his eyes were wavering. I thought it was maybe wandering eye, something correctable, but then they did. So I wasn't really prepared for a diagnosis of blindness, so that was an utter shock to me. It's sort of like I fell out of the world. It was almost too big to even grasp, and the idea of bringing a child into the world without the equipment, as I saw it, to deal with the world was overwhelming to me. But blindness, Dr. Schuler, was just the beginning, because it soon became apparent that he wasn't developing in other ways. So the cyst apparently had affected the brain as well, and he wasn't learning to walk. He didn't learn to walk or talk, and he began to become very sensitive. Like his whole body was a raw nerve ending, and his hands, he'd ball them up in fists so he wouldn't have to touch anything because they were too sensitive. And his ears, it was like he'd hear just the slightest sound and it would overwhelm him. And his brain was completely dysfunctional. I was heartbroken for him, and that I'd brought him into this world And he would have he was having such a hard time of it.
Did you have guilt?
Overwhelming guilt.
Did you really?
Guilt I thought I'd never get past. It was eating away at me that I blamed myself, that this was my fault. How could I bring, as a mother, a child into the world in that state? And I was so scared.
Were you a Christian at the time?
No, I wasn't. Through that experience with Rex, that is what brought me to my knees, brought me to know Christ, living life with my son. I was walking on eggshells all the time and just overwhelmed. And also my marriage broke up in the midst of all that. So
which often happens, yes.
Often does, and I found myself utterly alone, scared. Before that, I thought I could solve my own problems. I couldn't solve that. And I began searching. God stepped into our lives, my life, drew me to him. And he two miracles as I began going to church in desperation, really, to plead for my son. There were two immediate miracles. One was a little keyboard for Rex that showed up in our house as a gift for his 2nd birthday, right after I began going to church. And that was a gift of grace from God. When Rex laid his fingers on those keys for the first time, I think he knew it himself that this was directly from God, because there was something in those keys that drew him out of his sensitivities. He uncoiled his own hands, and it was like those keys, it made sense. The keys, the notes, the order, it was like God was giving him music, whereas the world was giving him chaos and dysfunction.